quick follow-up to a podcast episode I did on Friday on limitless thinking. And it's episode 313, if you haven't listened. I'll try to sum it up here. Basically, and I'm going through this with my students right now, and so that was top of mind. But when you sit down to do a goal list, I call it a wish list, because it has to start as wishes. Everybody needs goals, by the way. So you should want goals. But how do you get goals? So goals come from dreams, from things you want, things that mean something to you. So what do you wish for? I teach my students to create a wish list. But when you create a wish list, what happens is when people think with their limited ways, and we all do this, so it's not just you, it's pretty much everyone, unless they know this trick. So I didn't know this trick for a longest time. And once I learned it, I was like, yeah, I got to share this. So people come to the table to create their goals often with things that they think they're supposed to do, or they should do, or they must do, and it's not necessarily for the right reasons. It's not like what I call heart-centered goals. So you start with a wish list. It's like dream whatever you want to dream, as if you have all the money in the world, you have all the ability and creativity and all that. And so one of my students, and we're going through this in my program, and one of my students heard my podcast episode, and she was like, oh my God. She said to me, oh my God, I had something that was limitless that I didn't put on my list. And now I get it. And I used a pretty good analogy in my episode. I was very proud of myself for that. And so the analogy really described the difference really between limited and limitless thinking. And so I was thinking about how to describe how this happens, because you don't always have things when you learn them sink in the first time. And so I thought this would be a good thing to talk about. And so when you hear something for the first time, and I always tell my students, listen to things over and over. Like if you got coached on a coaching call, listen to it again, because you hear things the second time you didn't hear the first time. And it goes for like learning new things too. It goes for training when you do training. So she's doing this training and she's hearing a lot of this stuff for the first time. And so what happens when you're hearing something for the first time, it's this, let's call it a thought bubble from somebody else. Like it's in the form of energy, and it comes out of that person's mouth and you're receiving it. And so it's like it flows right by you the first time. It's like you watch it, or it might go in one ear and out the other. So that's kind of like what happens. And sometimes we're resistant to the thought that is shared, the expression of whatever that person's saying. Sometimes we're resistant to it. I'm not suggesting she was resistant to limitless thinking. It was just a new concept to her, and she was like, And so the first time you hear something, often you're like, huh? So you just kind of like, you're like, huh? And so you do your best with what you know, and what you know is limited thinking in this case. So she heard it again, plus she heard it in a different way, and sometimes that helps too. A little spin on something presented a different way. And then the second time you're like, huh? Like Scooby-Doo, right? So you're like, huh? It just like sinks in the second time. Or maybe it takes 3 times or 4 times. Some people, it takes longer, because the more resistant you are to it, the less likely you are to listen to something again if you're resistant to it. But if you're open to receiving, you'll get it a lot sooner. So I just thought that was a really great thing to follow up with, to talk about, because we have to be open to listening to new concepts multiple times so they can be absorbed. And then once you start applying them, in this case, then you really get it. She gets it. She has something on her list now that means a lot to her, that required limitless thinking. And it wasn't on her list because she had limits to what was possible for her. So I'm so glad I did that podcast episode and that it resonated. And I hope it helped other people as well really start to dream bigger dreams for themselves. And just know, if you have trouble taking action after listening to that, listen to it again. Our brain gets smarter every time we expose it to knowledge. Your brain is more evolved the second time you listen to something. And then you'll be like, oh, I get it. So that's my Sunday tidbit. Bye.